So in the previous video, I explained the formation of the early universe in the Big Bang and shared some theories about time and space which make it easier to explain this next part. As I explained, the energy of the Big Bang unleashed photons, which collided into one another to create hydrogen and basically started a series of chain reactions which led to the formation of early stars. But in this video, we will be talking about planet Earth and life on Earth. And I want to start out by suggesting that many, if not all planets, are the results of stars cooling into mineral orbs with a solar core remaining at the centre, which still contains its own vortex, which causes growth or shrinkage of the planet and also causes it to spin. What is interesting about this is that the core of the Earth generates Earth's magnetosphere and helps to trap in the atmosphere. We know that the early Earth was volcanic, as one could expect of a star cooling into mineral form, and that all matter on Earth is composed of stardust, which helps to cement this idea. What is also curious is the abundance of hydrogen and oxygen on Earth, which are key elements in the nuclear fusion reactions of stars, and combined in the atmosphere as water into rainfall, helping to form the early oceans and cooling the planet further. The Earth's core is a revolving molten sphere mostly comprised of iron and nickel, the iron helping to generate the magnetosphere and electromagnetic effects of the Earth, such as the north and south poles. Needless to say, the core of the Earth is incredibly hot, reaching temperatures of up to 5,000 degrees Celsius, and is also under constant high pressures. So much so that it is surrounded by a thick shell of diamond made from carbon being heated and pressurized into a crystal structure. By contrast, the seabed is also a high pressure environment, with temperatures regularly reaching -1 degrees Celsius, or a degree below freezing. We know that early life started in the oceans in underwater volcanic vents, and that all life on Earth are carbon-based life forms. I would therefore suggest that as carbon is burned under high pressure in the core and pushed out towards the Earth's surface as volcanic magma through underwater volcanic vents, it is suddenly met by high pressure and cooling from the ocean, and I speculate that this process frees up a very malleable material from carbon that we know as single-celled organisms, which are imbued with energy from the star core of the Earth, which then animates them with life, and have a cell wall and internal store of glucose or natural sugars. Glucose has the chemical formula carbon 6, hydrogen 12 and oxygen 6. We know that water is composed of hydrogen and 2 oxygen, so it is easy to understand how the carbon-based cells take the hydrogen and oxygen in from the water and use it to create sugars with which to feed and energize themselves on. I postulate that the single-celled organisms ejected from the volcanic vents come in 3 varieties: those that reach the surface of the ocean, those that stuck around in the middle of the ocean, and those that reached the seabed. The cells that reached the surface intuitively took advantage of the sunlight, likely either changing colour to green to maximise their solar absorption, or finding it easier to survive if they happen to already have a greenish hue. In any case, these cells would become planktons and algae, and would develop a green pigment called chlorophyll, created from their stored glucose, which enabled them to take in energy from sunlight, carbon dioxide from the early Earth's volcanic atmosphere, hydrogen from the water in the ocean around them, and the hydrogen and sunlight both make excellent fuel, and the carbon could be used in either storing more glucose or creating more complex multicellular organisms. While the oxygen taken from the ocean around them that was not used in creating more glucose was exuded as a waste product, which helped to both cool and oxygenize the early Earth. As the algae began to wash up on the shores, they likely developed into mosses, seaweeds, grasses and early plants, which all still utilize this photosynthetic power and require water for their sustainment as a testament to their oceanic roots, and also, as you know, take in carbon dioxide and output oxygen. As for the single-celled organisms that became stuck in the middle of the ocean, I theorize that they likely clumped together and formed jellyfish and other aquatic bacterial slimes. While the cells that lay on the seabed most likely dying took at least one of 2 evolutionary routes, some joined together into long chains of multicellular organisms that fed on debris and other cells dying on the seafloor and became the first flatworms, while others joined together, anchored themselves into the seabed, taking in mineral nutrients from the ground, grew up towards the light source penetrating the ocean above, and fanned at the tip to maximize their intake of sunlight, in becoming the first mushrooms. The internal structure of the mushroom, that also makes up its mycelium root network, is called hyphae, and is what these early multicellular cluster mushrooms would have looked like before developing into their more recognizable form that we know today. The mushrooms developed sporing as a means to spread themselves, as each spore contains a genetic blueprint from the growing mushroom. Mushroom spores washed up on the beaches and travelled in the wind to colonise the earth with mushrooms. Some of these grew to gigantic proportions and became the first early trees. Some mushrooms have symbiotic relationships with trees, only growing near certain trees as a testimony to this evolutionary compatibility and common ancestry. It's also worth noting that sexual reproduction, which can be considered a form of sporing, in which the genetic process is transferred in the same sort of way, it also only comes after mushrooms develop in the early ocean. Flatworms composed of cellular tissue would have been very soft and easily penetrated by mushroom spores flowing around the ocean. I would suggest that mushrooms started to grow within flatworms and ultimately evolved into the first brains and nervous systems. To understand this, we can look at a few examples. Firstly, there is the fact that brains largely resemble mushrooms, with the brain having a brain stem supporting a large, roughly dome-shaped organ. Some mushrooms even look like brains. The second point to make is that many psychedelic substances which rewire the brain, are tryptamine chemicals found in mushrooms, which the brain also produces by itself in the form of such as dimethyltryptamine. Finally, we can look at parasitic mushrooms like cordyceps, which are capable of sporing onto ants and other insects, burrowing into their flesh and taking control of their brains and nervous systems. These parasitic mushrooms then cause the ant to climb high, pinch a branch and bloom into a new mushroom to spore on other ants, which shows how, at least in bugs, like those early flatworms, mushrooms are capable of acting as a superior control centre, a brain or nervous system to the bug's own developing system. In fact, its ability to be so parasitic and take control of the ant suggests that it is the ancestral origin of the ant's own nervous system. I would go on to suggest that the mushrooms then shaped the evolution of the flatworms, using their carbon deposits to develop exoskeletons and evolving them into early crustaceans and sea bugs, which also went on to become land and air bugs through evolving to suit their new environment on land when they crawled out of the seas. Some flatworms also went on to become early fish, and these fish then went on to develop bones, including the spine, which shows the common ancestry of anything with a spine to the first fishes with spine called hycoichthyes. We know from walking catfish and other amphibious fishes that the fish likely went on to develop into amphibians, and that amphibians that evolved to spend more time on land than in water went on to become the first reptiles. Reptiles then split into a few evolutionary categories: dinosaurs, birds, and proto-mammals. Proto-mammals being somewhere between a reptile and a mammalian animal. In fact, in mammals and humans, the oldest and most base part of the brain is called the R-complex or reptilian complex, from its origin developing out of reptiles. However, the age of mammals was superseded by the age of the dinosaurs. Gigantic plants generating huge amounts of oxygen allowed the insect and animal life to also develop to extraordinary sizes, and the dinosaurs came to rule the earth. These titanic monsters, somewhere between a reptile and a bird, ruled the world for around 165 million years before going extinct around 65 million years ago. We cannot say for certain what killed the dinosaurs off, only that the main culprits are some type of deoxygenation event, such as a large methane released from herds of gigantic herbivores farting out these gases, the cataclysmic effects of a meteor the size of Manhattan striking the Earth around the time, or the effects of climate change in general ushering in an ice age which the cold-blooded dinosaurs were unable to adapt to. Regardless of the cause, we know that the events that killed the dinosaurs off was a deoxygenating event, since only smaller creatures survived it. In fact, there were 5 major extinction level events in Earth's history, all driven by climate change. The 2 that killed the dinosaurs off were the most recent 2 events: the Triassic-Jurassic extinction and the Cretaceous-Paleogene extinction, which saw the death of the last of the dinosaurs in the emerging Ice Age. The Ice Age then saw the emergence of Ice Age megafauna, such as woolly mammoths and saber-toothed tigers, which all then died off in the late Pleistocene extinctions as the Earth moved into its current age of the Holocene, beginning just 11,700 years ago, leading to the evolution of much smaller creatures. The current Holocene extinction which the Earth is going through is thought to be largely caused by humans and human activity, the ticking time bomb of modern climate change, which, if left unregulated, will kill us all. Around 9 million years ago, the first apes developed, and it is from this family that the first early hominids developed, beginning with troglodyte ape men such as Australopithecus and gradually evolving into more human-like ape men creatures such as Homo heidelbergensis, Homo erectus, which was the first to walk upright, and Neanderthals, among others. The evolution of opposable thumbs allowed these creatures an advantage in developing wood and stone tools in the early Stone Age. In fact, modern monkeys and apes have even been observed using such tools, for example, grabbing a rock to smash the shell of a hard nut to get at its nutritious innards. Homo sapiens, humans as we know them today, developed in Africa around 200,000 years ago, and are credited with being responsible for the extinction of the other hominid creatures through either war or interbreeding. However, what happened to cause hominid creatures to evolve or develop into humans in the first place is unknown, with a notable gap in the fossil record which might suggest either a sudden rapid evolution from one thing into the other, genetic engineering from higher beings or aliens, or otherwise that the fossil that is the between stage or missing link between early hominids and humans has not yet been discovered. Whatever the case, early humans were nomadic hunter-gatherers in tribal structures with beliefs in ancestral plant and animal spirits, burial rites and primitive technologies. They spread out over Africa, across the world via crossing the oceans, into Europe and the Eurasian steppes, and across ice bridges from between Russia and the Americas, and across Asia and across the various islands in between. They made various burial mound structures and some early camps or religious sites such as Göbekli Tepe and the earliest form of Stonehenge known as Woodhenge. There is some evidence to suggest that there were even ancient advanced cultures that predate ours, such as the Sphinx showing water damage from erosion, suggesting that it was built long before the Egyptians came and resculpted its head to the likeness of Pharaoh Khafre. However, this is pure speculation as we don't have all of the facts yet. With developments in agriculture and farming, humans began to camp and make settlements near their farmlands. This eventually led an early people called the Alu-Baid to settle and create the first known city called Uruk in what was then Sumeria, but is now modern-day Iraq. The Alu-Baid brought with them depictions of their mother goddess Ishtar, who is the first named goddess in mythology. The Alu-Baid associated Ishtar with the fertile earth and the crops, which is also known to be a common association made by Stone Age peoples between the woman and the fertile ground, since the Stone Age Venus figures are often found around Stone Age agriculture sites and long predate Ishtar. So we will be touching more on these ancient rites and fertility beliefs in later episodes, but the next episode will be focused on early creation myths and the commonalities that link them.